The rain pounded the streets of Portland, Oregon, as Caleb huddled under a flickering street lamp. His backpack soaked and his heart shattered. At 17, he'd just been kicked out of his family's home for coming out as gay. His father's words, "You're no son of mine," ringing in his ears like a cruel anthem. By morning, his older brother, Ethan, had already claimed his bedroom, erasing Caleb's existence from the house they'd grown up in together. Caleb's sneakers squelched against the pavement as he wandered, the city's neon lights blurring through his tears. He'd always known his conservative family might not understand, but the betrayal cut deeper than he'd imagined. Ethan, his brother, his protector through childhood scrapes and late-night talks, hadn't said a word in his defense, just watched as their father shoved Caleb out the door. He found shelter in a 24-hour diner, the kind with sticky tables and waitresses who called you hon. A woman named Marla, with tired eyes and a kind smile, slid a coffee across the counter without charging him. "You look like you need it," she said, her voice a lifeline. Caleb clutched the mug, its warmth the only comfort in a world that suddenly felt too big. He didn't know where to go, but he knew he couldn't go back. The next few days were a blur of cold nights and fleeting kindnesses. A homeless shelter took him in, but the cots were hard, and the air smelled of despair. Caleb's phone buzzed with messages from friends, but none offered a place to stay. Fear of their own parents' judgment kept them at a distance. He felt like a ghost, haunting the edges of a life he no longer belonged to. At the shelter, he met Jamie, a lanky 19-year-old with a crooked smile and a story not unlike his own. Jamie had been on the streets for a year, kicked out by his religious aunt after she caught him kissing a boy at a church picnic. "Family's supposed to love you," Jamie said, tossing a pebble into a puddle. "But sometimes they're the first to break you." Caleb and Jamie became inseparable, two lost souls navigating a world that didn't seem to want them. They shared stolen moments of laughter, swapping stories of better days under the dim glow of streetlights. Jamie's optimism was infectious. Dreamed of becoming a musician, strumming an old guitar he'd salvaged from a thrift store. Caleb, who'd always loved writing, started jotting down lyrics for Jamie's melodies, their dreams weaving together like a fragile thread of hope. One night, under a bridge where they'd taken shelter from a storm, Jamie pressed his lips to Caleb's. It was tentative, electric, a spark in the dark. Caleb's heart raced, not just from the kiss, but from the realization that he wasn't alone anymore. "We'll make it," Jamie whispered, his breath warm against Caleb's cheek. "We'll build something new." But survival wasn't romantic. They scrounged for food, dodged cops, and faced the constant threat of violence from those who saw their love as a sin. Caleb clung to Jamie's hand, but fear gnawed at him. What if this was all they'd ever have? A life of running, hiding, scraping by. Still, Jamie's presence was a light in the darkness, a reminder that love could exist even in the hardest places. Weeks turned into months. Caleb found a job washing dishes at a dive bar, the kind of place where no one asked questions. The pay was barely enough to split a cheap motel room with Jamie, but it was a start. They dreamed of leaving Portland, maybe heading to San Francisco, where they'd heard life was kinder to people like them. Caleb wrote their dreams into a notebook, pages filled with plans for a future they could barely imagine. One evening, as Caleb scrubbed grease from a skillet, Marla, the diner waitress, who'd become a sort of guardian angel, slipped him a flyer for a youth center that helped LGBTQ kids. "They've got resources," she said. "Might give you and Jamie a shot." Caleb stared at the flyer, hope flickering in his chest. Maybe this was the lifeline they needed. At the youth center, they met Lena, a counselor with a no-nonsense attitude and a heart big enough to hold every kid who walked through the door. She helped them apply for housing assistance and connected Jamie with a music program for at-risk youth. For the first time, Caleb felt like someone believed in them. But even as their lives began to stabilize, the ache of his family's rejection lingered. He hadn't spoken to Ethan or his parents in months, and the silence was a wound that refused to heal. Caleb didn't know it yet, but fate was already weaving a path back to his Brothera collision course that would force them to confront the past and decide what family really meant. The youth center became Caleb and Jamie's sanctuary, a place where they could breathe without looking over their shoulders. Lena, the counselor, had a knack for seeing through their bravado to the fear beneath. She pushed Caleb to enroll in a GED program, since he'd never finished high school after being kicked out. "You're smart, kid," she said, handing him a stack of books. "Don't let the world tell you otherwise." Caleb threw himself into studying, the routine grounding him. Jamie, meanwhile, poured his heart into music, his guitar strumming late into the night as Caleb scribbled lyrics by lamplight. Their tiny shared apartment, a cramped studio with peeling wallpaper, felt like a palace because it was theirs. They'd lie on the floor, dreaming of a stage where Jamie would play and Caleb would watch from the front row, proud and unafraid. But the past wasn't done with Caleb. One afternoon, while sorting mail at the youth center, he found a letter from his mother. His hands shook as he tore it open, expecting an apology, a plea to come home. Instead, it was a cold note. "Your father's sick. Thought you should know." No mention of love, no hint of regret. Caleb crumpled the paper, his chest tight with a mix of anger and guilt. He hadn't thought about his father in months, but the news hit like a punch. Jamie found him sitting on the apartment's fire escape, staring at the city skyline. "You okay?" he asked, sitting close enough that their shoulders brushed. Caleb showed him the letter, and Jamie's face darkened. "They don't deserve you," he said, fierce. "But if you need to go, I'm with you." Caleb leaned into him, grateful for the anchor Jamie had become. He wasn't sure if he wanted to see his family, but the thought of his father's illness stirred something he couldn't ignore. Portland's winter was brutal, and money was tight. Caleb picked up extra shifts at the bar, his hands raw from scrubbing pots. Jamie's music gigs brought in a little cash, but not enough to ease the constant pressure. One night, after a long shift, Caleb came home to find Jamie practicing a new song, his voice soft and haunting. "It's for you," Jamie said, shy. The lyrics were about a boy who found home in another's heart, and Caleb's eyes burned with tears. For a moment, the world felt right. But life had a way of pulling the rug out. The youth center's funding was cut, and Lena broke the news that their housing assistance might end. Caleb felt the familiar panic creep in the fear of being back on the streets. He and Jamie scrambled to find solutions, applying for every program they could. Lena fought for them, but the system was a maze of red tape. "We'll figure it out," Jamie said, but his voice wavered, betraying his own fear. Caleb's thoughts kept drifting to his family. He hadn't told Jamie about the dreams that woke him at night, memories of Ethan teaching him to ride a bike, their laughter echoing through their old backyard. Ethan's silence when Caleb was kicked out had hurt more than his father's anger. Why hadn't his brother fought for him? The question gnawed at Caleb, but he pushed it down, focusing on survival. One evening, Lena called them into her office. She'd found a temporary housing program in Seattle, but it meant leaving Portland and the life they'd started to build. "It's a fresh start," she said, "but it's your call." Caleb and Jamie spent hours debating, weighing the risks against the promise of stability. Seattle was a chance to escape the ghosts of their pasts, but it also meant leaving behind the community that had saved them. As they packed their few belongings, Caleb's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Caleb, it's Ethan. Dad's worse. Can we talk?" The words hit like a freight train. Caleb stared at the screen, his heart pounding. Jamie, sensing the shift, took his hand. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. Caleb nodded. But inside, he was torn. Ethan had betrayed him, taken his place, his room, his family. Why should he care now? Yet something in Caleb couldn't let go. He replied, "Where are you?" The response came quickly. Ethan was in Portland, staying at a hotel. Their father was in hospice, and Ethan wanted to see him. Caleb's mind raced danger, hurt, and a flicker of hope collided. He didn't know what he'd say to his brother, but he knew he had to face him. The next day, Caleb and Jamie stood outside a nondescript hotel, rain soaking their jackets. Caleb's stomach churned as he knocked on Ethan's door. When it opened, there was his brother, older, tired, but still the boy who'd once been his hero. Ethan's eyes widened, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Ethan said, "I'm sorry," and the words cracked something open in Caleb's heart. The hotel room smelled of stale coffee and regret. Caleb stood frozen, Jamie's hand steady on his shoulder, as Ethan gestured for them to sit. The air was thick with unspoken history, and Caleb's heart thudded so loudly he was sure Ethan could hear it. "I didn't know where you went," Ethan said, his voice low. "After Dad, I tried to find you, but you were gone." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You didn't try hard enough," he snapped. "You watched him throw me out. You took my room. Ethan. My life." Jamie squeezed his hand, a silent reminder to breathe. Ethan looked down, his hands twisting in his lap. "I was scared," he admitted. "Dad was. He was so angry. I thought if I said anything, he'd turn on me too." The confession stung, but it wasn't enough. Caleb wanted to scream, to demand why Ethan hadn't fought for him, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, Jamie spoke, his voice calm but firm. "Caleb's been through hell because of your family. If you're here to make excuses, we're leaving." Ethan's eyes flicked to Jamie, then back to Caleb, pleading, "I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to make it right." Ethan explained that their father's cancer had worsened rapidly. He was in hospice now, with weeks left at most. Their mother was a wreck, and Ethan had been carrying the weight of it all. "I know I failed you," Ethan said, "but Dad's asking for you. I don't know if it's guilt or something else, but he wants to see you." Caleb's chest tightened. The man who'd called him a disgrace now wanted closure. It felt like a trap. Jamie and Caleb left the hotel without promising anything. Back at their apartment, they sat in silence, the weight of Ethan's words hanging between them. "Do you want to see him?" Jamie asked finally. Caleb didn't know. Part of him wanted to let his father die without closure, to keep the pain locked away. But another part, a smaller, softer part, wondered if there was something left to salvage. The next morning, they boarded a bus to Seattle, their belongings stuffed into 2 duffels. The housing program Lena had found was a lifeline, but Caleb's mind was elsewhere. He kept replaying Ethan's words, the way his brother's voice had cracked. Jamie noticed, nudging him with a gentle smile. "Whatever you decide, I'm here. Always." Caleb leaned against him, the bus's hum lulling his racing thoughts. Seattle was louder, brighter, overwhelming. Their new place was a shared house with other queer youth. A chaotic but warm space filled with laughter and second chances. Caleb and Jamie settled in, but the question of his father lingered. Ethan texted again, asking if Caleb would come to the hospice. "Mom's falling apart," he wrote. "She needs you too." Caleb deleted the message, but it burned in his mind. Days turned into weeks. Caleb started classes at a community college, his GED within reach. Jamie joined a local band, his music filling their evenings with hope. But the past kept pulling Caleb back. One night, he found an old photo in his backpack, him and Ethan as kids, grinning at a county fair. He stared at it, tears blurring the edges. Jamie found him and didn't ask questions, just held him until the ache eased. Finally, Caleb made a decision. He'd go to the hospice. Not for his father, but for himself, though, closed the door on the pain. Jamie insisted on coming, and they took a Greyhound back to Portland. The hospice was sterile, quiet, the air heavy with finality. Ethan met them in the lobby, his face drawn. "Thank you," he whispered, leading them to their father's room. Their father, once a towering figure, was now frail, hooked to machines. His eyes flickered with recognition as Caleb approached. "I'm sorry," he rasped, his voice barely audible. Caleb waited for the anger to surge, but all he felt was pity. "I don't forgive you," he said quietly. "But I'm here." His father's eyes welled up, and for the first time, Caleb saw regret in them. Outside, Ethan broke down, apologizing again. "I should have been better," he said. "I want to be your brother again." Caleb didn't know if he could trust him, but the sincerity in Ethan's voice cracked his defenses. Jamie, ever his rock, nodded subtly, giving Caleb the strength to say, "We'll see." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Back in Seattle, Caleb wrestled with the hospice visit. His father's apology hadn't erased the years of pain, but it had shifted something inside him. He felt lighter, like he'd set down a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. Jamie noticed the change, teasing him with a grin. "You're smiling more. It's freaking me out." Caleb laughed, shoving him playfully, but the warmth in his chest was real. Their new life in Seattle was a balancing act. The shared house was loud, with roommates blasting music or arguing over dishes. But it felt like family in a way Caleb hadn't known since childhood. He and Jamie carved out their own space, a corner of the living room where they'd write songs or study under a single lamp. Caleb's classes were demanding, but he thrived, his professors praising his essays. Jamie's band booked their first real gig, and Caleb was there, cheering louder than anyone. Ethan kept texting, small gestures, at first a photo of their old dog, a memory from their childhood. Caleb responded cautiously, unsure how to rebuild a bridge that had been burned so thoroughly. Jamie encouraged him to take it slow. "Family's complicated," he said one night, strumming his guitar. "But if he's trying, maybe he's worth a chance." Caleb nodded, but trust was hard-won. One evening, Ethan called. Their father had passed. The funeral was in a few days, and Ethan asked if Caleb would come. "Mom wants you there," he said. "And so do I." Caleb's throat tightened. He hadn't seen his mother since the night he was kicked out, her silence as deafening as his father's anger. Jamie sat with him as he weighed the decision, his presence a steady anchor. "I'll go," Caleb said finally, "but only if you're with me." The funeral was in a small church outside Portland. The kind of place Caleb had once loved before it became a symbol of rejection. He and Jamie stood at the back, hands clasped, as mourners filled the pews. Caleb's mother spotted him and froze, her eyes red from crying. She approached, hesitant, and whispered, "I'm so sorry, Caleb." He nodded, unable to speak. The weight of her apology was heavy, but it wasn't enough not yet. Ethan delivered the eulogy, his voice steady but raw. He spoke of their father's flaws, his regrets, and his late attempt at redemption. Caleb listened, feeling the eyes of the congregation on him. Some whispered, others stared, but Jamie's hand in his kept him grounded. After the service, Ethan pulled Caleb aside. "I'm moving to Seattle," he said. "I want to be closer. To try again." Caleb didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. The possibility of reconciliation both terrifying and hopeful. Back in Seattle, life moved forward. Caleb aced his finals, and Jamie's band got a write-up in a local paper. They celebrated with cheap pizza and a night of dancing at a queer club, their laughter drowning out the past. But Ethan's words lingered. He'd rented an apartment not far from Caleb's house, and he kept reaching out coffee invites, texts about old memories. Caleb agreed to meet him one Saturday, his heart a tangle of nerves. At a small cafe, Ethan was already there, looking out of place in his button-up shirt. They talked awkwardly at first, but then Ethan slid an old journal across the table. "It was yours," he said. "I found it in the attic. I kept it safe." Caleb opened it, recognizing his teenage handwriting dreams. Poems. Fears. Tears stung his eyes. "Why didn't you fight for me?" he asked, voice breaking. Ethan looked away. "I was weak. But I'm here now." Caleb didn't forgive him that day, but he felt the first stirrings of possibility. Jamie, waiting outside, hugged him tight. "You're stronger than you know," he said. Caleb smiled, realizing that strength wasn't just surviving, it was choosing to let people back in, even when it hurt. Seattle's spring brought cherry blossoms and a cautious hope. Caleb and Ethan started meeting weekly, their conversations stilted but growing easier. Ethan shared stories of his own struggles, pressure to be the perfect son, guilt over his silence when Caleb was kicked out. "I didn't know how to stand up to Dad," he admitted over coffee. "But I should have tried." Caleb listened, his anger softening but not gone. Trust was a slow burn. Jamie's band was gaining traction, playing gigs across the city. Caleb became their unofficial lyricist, his words weaving through Jamie's melodies. At one show, under the glow of stage lights, Jamie dedicated a song to Caleb, his voice carrying love and defiance. The crowd roared, and Caleb's heart swelled. This was the life they'd fought for, a life where they could be themselves, unapologetically. But challenges persisted. The housing program had strict rules, and one roommate's carelessness nearly got them evicted. Caleb and Jamie rallied the house to negotiate with the program director, their leadership earning respect from the others. It was a small victory, but it reminded Caleb how far he'd come from the scared kid under the street lamp. He was building something real, something his family couldn't take away. Ethan started joining them at the house, awkward at first but eager to learn. He asked questions about Caleb's life, about Jamie, about the community they'd found. One night, he brought pizza and sat through a heated debate about queer representation in media, listening more than he spoke. Caleb watched him, seeing glimpses of the brother he'd once idolized. "He's trying," Jamie said later. And Caleb nodded, feeling the walls between them start to crumble. Their mother reached out too, her letters more frequent but still tentative. She wrote about her garden, about missing Caleb, about her own regrets. Caleb read them with mixed feelings, unsure if he could forgive her silence. Jamie suggested writing back, even if it was just to say he needed time. So Caleb did, his words careful but honest. "I'm not ready to be your son again," he wrote. "But I'm here." It was a start. One evening, Ethan invited Caleb and Jamie to his apartment. It was small, cluttered with books and photos, including one of them as kids. "I kept it," Ethan said, sheepish. They talked late into the night, memories unspooling like thread. Ethan admitted he'd been jealous of Caleb's courage, his ability to live authentically despite the cost. "I want to be like that," he said. Caleb's throat tightened. For the first time, he saw Ethan not as a traitor, but as someone lost in his own way. Jamie's band landed a spot at a major festival, a turning point. Caleb helped organize, pouring his heart into flyers and social media posts. The night of the show, he stood in the crowd, watching Jamie shine. Ethan was there too, clapping awkwardly but genuinely. After, they all grabbed burgers at a diner, laughing like they hadn't in years. Caleb caught Ethan's eye and felt something shift, a fragile bridge forming where a chasm had been. But life wasn't a fairy tale. Caleb's mother called, her voice shaky. She wanted to visit Seattle, to see him. The idea terrified him. What if she couldn't accept who he was now? Jamie held his hand as he wrestled with the decision. "You don't owe her anything," Jamie said. "But if you want to try, I'll be right there." Caleb nodded, knowing that whatever happened, he had a family now one he'd chosen. Caleb's mother arrived in Seattle on a rainy afternoon, her suitcase small and her eyes nervous. Caleb met her at a cafe, Jamie by his side, his heart a storm of hope and fear. She looked older, her hair streaked with gray, but her smile was the same one that used to comfort him as a child. "You look good, Caleb," she said softly. He nodded, unsure how to respond. The conversation was slow, careful. She spoke about her life since their father's death, her regrets, her attempts to understand. "I was wrong," she said, tears in her eyes. "I should have protected you." Caleb's chest ached, but he didn't let her off easy. "You didn't," he said, "and I had to survive without you." She nodded, accepting the truth. Jamie's hand under the table kept Caleb steady. They spent the day together, walking through Pike Place Market, the bustle a buffer for their heavy words. She asked about Jamie, about their life, and for the first time, she listened without judgment. Caleb saw glimpses of the mother he'd loved, but he knew trust would take time. As they parted, she hugged him, and he let her, though his arms were stiff. "I'll keep trying," she promised. He nodded, hoping she meant it. Back at the house, life was a whirlwind. Jamie's band was booked for more gigs, and Caleb juggled school and a new job at a bookstore. Ethan became a regular at their house, bringing groceries or helping with repairs. He was learning, slowly, what it meant to be an ally. One night, he joined them at a pride event, his first, looking nervous but determined. Caleb watched him hold a rainbow flag, awkward but proud, and felt a spark of hope. The housing program stabilized, thanks to a grant Lena had fought for. Caleb and Jamie started saving for their own place, dreaming of a space that was truly theirs. They wrote songs together, Caleb's lyrics sharper now, filled with resilience and love. At one gig, Jamie pulled Caleb on stage, handing him the mic to read a poem he'd written. The crowd cheered, and Caleb felt invincible, Jamie's smile lighting up the world. But the past wasn't done testing them. A letter arrived from their old church, inviting Caleb to a reconciliation event. The words were polite, but they reeked of the same judgment that had driven him away. He showed it to Jamie, who laughed bitterly. They want to fix you. They're the ones who are broken. Caleb tore the letter up, but the memories it stirred lingered. Ethan noticed Caleb's mood and asked about it. When Caleb explained, Ethan's face darkened. I used to believe that crap, he admitted. But seeing Jamie, I was wrong. He offered to go with Caleb to confront the church, to stand up for him now. Caleb hesitated, then agreed. They didn't know the church anything, but maybe facing it would close another wound. They drove to Portland, Jamie and Ethan flanking Caleb like guards. The church was unchanged, its steeple looming like a judgment. The pastor greeted them, his smile too wide. Caleb spoke, his voice steady, recounting the pain of being cast out. The pastor stammered, unprepared for his courage. Ethan stepped forward, his voice firm. You hurt my brother. That's on you. For the first time, Caleb felt like Ethan was truly on his side. Back in Seattle, Caleb felt lighter. He and Jamie celebrated with a quiet night, cooking dinner in their crowded kitchen. Ethan joined, and for once, the laughter felt easy. Caleb looked at them as chosen family, his brother fighting to be better, and knew he'd built something stronger than the pain he'd left behind. Summer in Seattle was vibrant, the city alive with festivals and pride flags waving from every corner. Caleb and Jamie moved into their own apartment, a tiny one-bedroom with a view of the Sound. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, filled with second-hand furniture and dreams. Caleb hung the old journal Ethan had saved on their wall, a reminder of how far he'd come. Ethan was a constant now, not just a visitor, but a part of their lives. He took a job at a community center, inspired by Caleb's resilience. I want to help kids like you, he told Caleb one day, his voice earnest. Caleb smiled, seeing his brother become someone he could admire again. Their mother visited more often, her apologies turning into action, small gifts, long talks, a willingness to learn. Jamie's band was on the cusp of something big, their music catching the ear of a small label. Caleb became their manager of sorts, handling bookings and promotion with a knack he hadn't known he had. At one show, he watched Jamie perform, his heart swelling with pride. Ethan was there too, cheering louder than anyone. And Caleb realized family could be rebuilt, piece by piece. But healing wasn't linear. Some days, Caleb woke with nightmares of the night he was kicked out, his father's voice echoing. Jamie held him through those moments, his presence a balm. Caleb started therapy, thanks to Lena's recommendation, and it helped him untangle the pain. He learned to forgive himself for the years he'd felt unworthy. And slowly, he began to forgive his family, not for their sake, but for his own peace. One afternoon, Caleb's mother asked him to visit their old house in Portland. I'm selling it, she said. I want you to have a say. The idea of returning to the place that had broken him was daunting. But Jamie and Ethan insisted on coming. The house was smaller than Caleb remembered, its walls holding memories both bitter and sweet. His mother handed him a box of his old things books. Photos. A stuffed bear he'd loved as a kid. I kept them, she said. I always hoped you'd come back. Caleb walked through his old room, now empty, and felt a strange closure. Ethan stood beside him. Quiet. I'm sorry I took this from you, he said. Caleb nodded, his throat tight. You're giving it back now, he replied. And they hugged. The first real embrace since they were kids. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Back in Seattle, Caleb and Jamie planned a trip to San Francisco, their old dream finally within reach. They saved every penny, their apartment filled with maps and guidebooks. Ethan offered to drive them to the airport, and their mother sent a care package snacks, a letter, a photo of them all at Caleb's graduation. The gesture made Caleb cry, but they were good tears, the kind that healed. The night before the trip, Jamie proposed. It wasn't grand, just the two of them on their balcony, stars above. His voice shaky but sure. You're my home, Caleb, he said, offering a simple ring. Caleb said yes, tears streaming, and they laughed and kissed until dawn. Ethan was the first to know, his grin wide as he planned a celebration. San Francisco was everything they dreamed, bright, bold, a city that embraced them without question. Caleb and Jamie wandered hand in hand, from the Castro's rainbow crosswalks to the Golden Gate Bridge's rusty glow. They visited queer bookstores, danced at clubs, and felt, for the first time, like they belonged everywhere. Caleb's heart was full, but it was the quiet moments sitting with Jamie on a hill, watching the city sparkle, that meant the most. Back in Seattle, they planned a small wedding. Ethan insisted on helping, organizing a venue at the community center where he worked. Their mother baked the cake, her hands trembling as she decorated it with pride colors. Lena flew in from Portland, her smile proud. The ceremony was simple, surrounded by their chosen family and a few new friends. Caleb and Jamie vowed to love each other through every storm, their voices steady despite tears. Ethan gave a toast, his words raw and heartfelt. I lost my brother once, he said, his voice breaking. But he found his way back, and I'm so damn proud of him. The room cheered, and Caleb hugged him, feeling the years of pain dissolve into something new, love. Imperfect, but real. His mother joined them, her embrace warm, and for the first time, Caleb felt like he had a family again. Jamie's band signed with the label, and Caleb took on a bigger role, managing their tours. They traveled together, each city a new adventure, each song a piece of their story. Caleb finished college, his degree a testament to his resilience. He started writing a memoir, pouring his journey into words that might help others. Ethan read the drafts, his feedback honest and encouraging. Years passed, and the wounds of the past became scars still there, but no longer bleeding. Caleb's mother moved to Seattle, closer to them, and they built a fragile but growing bond. Ethan became an advocate, speaking at events about his journey from silence to support. Caleb watched him, proud but still cautious, knowing some hurts never fully fade. One evening, Caleb and Jamie returned to the park where they'd first dreamed of a future together. They sat on a bench, the same kind from years ago, and watched the sunset. We made it, Jamie said, his hand in Caleb's. Through all of it, Caleb nodded, his heart full. They'd built a life not just of survival, but of joy, love, and meaning. The world hadn't always been kind, but it had given them each other and a family that, against all odds, had found its way back together. Caleb looked at Jamie, at the ring on his finger, at the life they'd fought for, and knew that love, in the end, was the strongest force of all.